It's great to see everyone tonight. There's a new Apple TV one-season series called Drops of God. Anyone want to admit to watching it so far? Okay, a few. The premise is that there is this one person in the world who knows the most about wine. And he has also amassed the greatest collection of wine in the entire world. And this person dies. His will stipulates that his home and the wine cellar inside it must not be split up. And there are two possible heirs. Possible heir number one, the deceased's estranged young adult daughter. Possible heir number two, the deceased's greatest protege, who now seems to be the person in the world who's the smartest about wine. To determine who will inherit, the two of them will be challenged on their own knowledge of wine. Many of the scenes that follow the opening invite the TV audience into the science and into the art of winemaking, into nuances of oak casks, agriculture, climate and weather, deep dives into flavor profiles, into aromas and tastes that if you just tune yourself in and maybe have really good, what are they called, nose buds, olfactory glands, something, that you could carefully experience with your whole being. There is beautiful imagery not only of the countryside of France, but of memories and associations, the filing cabinets and dining room consoles of our minds that are filled with tiny details of our lives that are probably much more significant than we ever realized. I think it's portrayed in a way that is stunning. And no spoilers, the journey to successfully solving these challenges is far from easy. Toward the end of last week's Parshat, Vayeshev, Joseph, our hero, the protagonist of these last 4 Torah portions of Genesis, finds himself imprisoned with 2 members of Pharaoh's court. And when they present him with a challenge of solving something, of interpreting something, the Hebrew word is pitron, for the interpretation of dreams, this ancient Hebrew word, he responds confidently that God will interpret. And he seemingly correctly predicts the outcome, the pardoning of Pharaoh's cupbearer and the execution of Pharaoh's baker. This week, Parshat Miketz turns the clock 2 years forward. The cupbearer in the palace has forgotten about Joseph, who is still imprisoned this whole time, until Pharaoh has 2 nightmares that awaken him once and then again, and no one in his court can interpret. Joseph, remembered by the butler, is quickly groomed and dressed, brought to the palace, and everyone is talking about interpreting dreams, this same word, pitron, over and over again. Joseph, again, has the opportunity to say that God will interpret dreams. But Joseph doesn't say that this time. Instead of patar, he says, Elohim ya'aneh et shlom paro. God will provide for Pharaoh's well-being. God will provide for Pharaoh's well-being. Medieval Italian commentator Sforno brings down a teaching from the Talmud that says that dreams, the content of dreams, is actually not manifest based directly on what we think they are, But dreams are manifest based on how they are explained by someone else to us. That puts a lot of pressure on this interpreter. Perhaps Joseph, in those 2 years in prison, had grown and understood that saying that God would interpret the dreams was one idea, but the pressure to explain what would happen, could happen, was much bigger. That the onus was on the interpreter to make sure that if someone had a scary dream, that it would be explained to them in a way that was in the dreamer's best interest. Among a seemingly endless supply of nightmares made real in our world, this week began with two that, as Rabbi Werber described, hit close to home for many members of our community. Many of us with connections to Brown University went to sleep knowing not only that 2 students had been murdered, but that the campus community was still locked down, as it would be overnight, for hours and hours and hours, sheltering in place with a shooter still at large. And we woke up on Sunday morning to the news that 16 hours ahead of us, 15 people welcoming the start of Hanukkah were murdered on Bondi Beach. Some of us have relatives there. Many of us have been there. Our neighbors in the Chabad movement are such a small world, very tied up to Chabad emissaries across the world. The ones there who died, their spouses. It's okay to feel shaken from all of this. And it's okay to feel the desire for pitron, for that biblical word that means interpretation, to discover some kind of a black and white, a singular interpretation of what this means. Why events that are supposed to remain in the realm of people's nightmares can become reality. How are Jews supposed to feel safe? How is any person supposed to feel safe? What about gun laws in America? And what went wrong in Australia, where warnings may not have been heeded in a country where guns are so much sparser than they are here, and mass shootings exceedingly rare? As the evolution of Joseph seems to indicate in this Torah portion, not every nightmare has a simple answer. In fact, that word, patar, pitron, interpretation, it occurs over and over again, but it only occurs here in the 40th and 41st chapter of Genesis. In the whole Bible, it's the only time we have that word, as if to say, maybe things have been categorized as so simplistic that we need to really leave behind the idea that every dream just has its interpretation, and instead turn ourselves back over to that idea that somehow goodness, that peace will flow to us and through us from God. Some might also say, when we think about our own sense of safety, that the lesson that Pharaoh's dreams, as Joseph says, are one and the same. The dream about the cows, the dream about the grains are one and the same. Sometimes safety and our perception of safety feel like they are also one and the same. Because if we don't feel safe, it's hard to really have this sense of grounding that allows us to have the real presence that helps us be safe. When we tune into that thing that people sometimes call our spidey sense, I think Tasha taught me that, of something that feels off in someone's behavior, we might not only be helping ourselves, but we're helping other people, and we might even be helping the person who something feels a little off about. If we're not feeling good about being somewhere, it is okay to step away. I know for me, sometimes asking myself questions like, who is around me? Is anything unusual? Where are the nearest exits? Places to hide? Seems like a recipe for increasing some of the anxiety that I might already feel every day. But maybe we can think of situational awareness as a mindfulness practice. And this could help us do the opposite. If we become more consistently aware of where we are, who is there with us, where our focus is, what might tend to distract us, and how, if we needed to leave sooner rather than later, we might do this. Maybe if we did that as a mindfulness practice, we could give ourselves a greater sense of calm, particularly in those kinds of experiences that already stretch our comfort zones. Consider for a minute the highly ritualized part of airplane travel in which our attention is drawn to a safety demonstration, a safety card, and how I think a lot of people really stop and pay attention, maybe ritually, maybe superstitiously, reading over that card or paying attention to what's being demonstrated. And we know statistically how safe commercial air travel is. What would it look like to take a bit of that lesson with us into less familiar settings, just to ask ourselves the same questions? What could I do? What would I do? But safety isn't just about the physicality of knowing when to walk away, or being thoughtful about being in places where we're comfortable or that feel within the realm of where we want to stretch our comfort. We know that as Jews, as LGBTQ people, that physical safety might not feel like the most important thing if we are not spiritually safe as well. For years and years and decades and millennia, we have fought to be fiercely confident in who we are, inspired to be the best people we can be, and feel a sense of belonging with our community. Spiritual safety. And we hold these things together. Tomorrow morning's Haftarah, quotes from the book of Zechariah. Maybe, Emmett, you could remind us that it includes the image of a menorah as the second temple is built in Jerusalem. Branches, olive oil, flowing from these olive trees. Lo v'chayel v'lo v'choach ki im beruchi. Not by might, not by strength, but by spirit, says Adonai Tzevaot. Imagine a return from exile, not by military strength, but by spirit alone. The versions of the Hanukkah story we tell do have elements of each: military might and spiritual power, physical comfort and spiritual comfort brought together. And we recognize that neither is likely to stand on its own for very long. This has been a hard week to welcome in Hanukkah. And it's also been a week in which I am grateful that Hanukkah is here. Joseph in the Parshat says, Elohim ya'aneh et shlom paro. God will attend to Paro's well-being. Today, difficult as it sometimes is to believe, we might assure ourselves that God will attend to our well-being. And this is complicated because among billions of people, there must be so many little nuances of how to assure every single person in the world has a sense of wholeness and justice, calm and peace, freedom and equity. Kind of makes those wine tasting experts seem like, no big deal. But we still have the opportunity to connect with our fellow human beings near and far, to understand as many nuances as we can of these aromas, of these flavors, of the diversity of humanity, each of us created in God's image. And the more we understand that, I think the more we will understand what a safer, freer, kinder, calmer, more welcoming world could be for them and for us. The more we will all feel attended to by that Spirit of God. Shabbat Shalom.